So moving on to our second section is the theory of change, and then Sister Amira will be providing us with a template. Sister Amira, do you have it in the chat? Can you put it there, inshallah ta'ala?
Yes, let me just, sorry, everyone, give me 1 second. Okay. I just dropped right now in the group chat. I know a couple of us are on our phones, but if you all are able to go ahead and click that, it should take you to a Google folder. We'll go through, what that looks like and everything. But for our last session, we want to take some time to kind of plan out what the 2024-2025 year will be like. This is not, something that you have to, set in stone or, this is an exact template of what you need to do. But inshallah, we'll kind of walk you all through the process of how you should go about approaching event planning or planning out things that you want your MSA to do. But this can also be modified for things that you want to do personally, like for yourself, right? The focus will be, of course, on MSAs, but if you want to take what we're learning and maybe use this tool as like a personal development plan as well, you're more than happy to do that. But I went ahead and dropped it in the chat. So if you guys can take a few seconds to go ahead and click that, just so that way you have it pulled up, especially if you are on like a computer or your laptop or desktop or something, that would be best if you could go ahead and pull that up. And then we have a short presentation to go through, and then we'll go ahead and jump into that activity. Okay. Alrighty, so we'll just go ahead and let me just share my screen. I believe you all are able to see that. Please let me know if you are not able to see my screen for any reason. But yes, alhamdulillah. So for our last session for today, we want to take some time to plan out what the 2025 year looks like for your MSA or even for you individually. SubhanAllah, there are a lot of different ways that you can go about planning out what your year looks like. And obviously, it's important to sit down with your team or your board or your MSA exec so that way you all can be on the same page. But we really want to take some time so that way we are creating like programs and events that are specific for the needs that your community has, right? So I gave an example a little bit earlier about, hey, if your MSA could have a really large, extravagant event of 1,000 people, but if you all don't even have, prayers on campus or Jummah on campus, then are we really meeting the like spiritual needs of the Muslims, right? Of the students on our campus. And so we want to be very intentional about the programs that we're doing because ultimately we want to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I think we can all agree that, for example, making sure we're all praying on campus or creating spaces for that is maybe a little bit more important than being able to host like a large scale event. Right. So inshallah, we're just going to go through a short presentation, kind of talking through a little bit about what this mindset looks like. And then we'll go ahead and jump right into the activities so that way we can take some time to plan out what the year looks. So we'll go ahead and jump right into it. So the objectives of today is to use a strategic approach that incorporates what we call the theory of change to develop an action plan for the academic year. Another objective is so that way, again, we're creating events and programs that are tailored to the needs of our MSA and that we're also developing and using proper metrics of success to evaluate its impact, right? Obviously, we all want to have really great and successful events, but what makes an event successful, right? How do we know an event was successful as opposed to maybe didn't meet our original objective or original goal? So we'll kind of talk through and work through what that looks like. And then the last objective is to develop MSA activities that are purposeful, impactful, and continuously improving. So that way we're fostering a culture of reflection and growth that better serves its members and the wider community. Something that we always try and keep in mind, or that we always try and suggest for MSA officers is yes, develop, good programs and events, but try and make sure that we're developing things that are also sustainable, right? So if your MSA only has $1,000 to spend, don't use every single penny and nickel and dime 1 year, and then the next year you guys don't have any money, right? You want to make sure that you are developing sustainable programs so that way your MSA can continue to grow and continue to serve the community at large, right? If you have one really, really awesome year, your next thing should be to figure out how are we going to continue doing what we're doing. And so that's going to be a big part of the action planning of what we're, going to be going through. So just a little introduction about what the theory of change is. How many of y'all have ever heard of that phrase, the theory of change? So it's this word right here, theory of change. Um, if you all want to maybe throw in the chat if you've ever heard about it before, even if you maybe don't or don't know what it means. Um, um, Okay, so the theory of change, just some insight into what that is. So throughout our lives, we all have different goals and ideas about how we want to achieve those things, right? But sometimes we don't take the time to really sit through, scrutinize, think about how we're going to get there and articulate our plan, right? We don't really come up with like a road plan a lot of times, right? Um, you guys don't have to like say it or anything like that, but how often do you guys like create goals in your heads, whether it's for yourself or maybe the team that you're with or your MSA board, but then you don't actually sit down and think about how we're going to get there, right? We don't maybe put in the time to think about, okay, do I have all of the resources, right? How am I going to get the funding for what I need? Do I have the time to create, these different events or programs or the different goals I want to reach? We come up with a really good plan, but I mean, we come up with a really good goal, but rarely do we come up with a plan that helps us get us to our goal. And that's oftentimes where we end up falling short, right? We don't reach our goals, not because we can't, but because we didn't come up with a plan to get there. And so a theory of change, this process basically encourages us to reflect on our goals and plans, to discuss them with other people, and to make them specific. So make an actual plan in place so that way we can reach our goals. Um, the theory of change encourages us to, be as detailed as we want. Sometimes the more detailed we are when it comes to creating a plan, the better it is for us, right? Because that way we're planning ahead and we're thinking and investing our time into like what our goal looks like. Sometimes, alhamdulillah, we're really lucky where we don't really come up with a plan and we can just kind of wing it and it ends up working out really well, right? But especially when you're in a position of leadership, it's really, really important that you take time, especially with a team, right? Your MSA team or your MSA board, to sit down and like come up with plans for the really big like objectives or important things that you want for your MSA. Because if you want to be able to develop like high quality programs or events, you want to make sure that it's like well thought out, right? You might get away with just winging something or doing something on the fly, right? But if you want things to be sustainable, if you want to make sure that you guys are doing it, recurringly, whether it's monthly, daily, every semester, you want to make sure there's a plan in place so that way your entire team can work together towards reaching that goal, right? And so some plans will look a little bit different, right? Having Jummah on campus every Friday may not require as many details or as many steps to get there as maybe hosting monthly halakas with a guest speaker, right? Depending on the scope of whatever it is that you're working towards, will require you to have like super duper detailed plans, and some may be a little bit relaxed, right? Some of them may require everyone on your team to be involved with the planning, and some of it may be like, okay, like one or two people on the team will be able to run it, right? So you won't be able to figure out what that looks like or gauge what that looks like until you actually sit down and kind of create some sort of plan for what that looks like. And so that plan is basically called the theory of change, right? It's the belief that if you do this, this, and this, and if you create that plan, it'll lead you to that success, right? Inshallah, of course, if Allah allows us to be able to do that. And so before we jump into our activity, I want you guys to take a couple of seconds. Um, you can close your eyes if you want to. You can stare right at the screen, whatever works best with you. But I want you guys to close your eyes or think about, take a minute or maybe 30 seconds to dream about what your ideal MSA looks like. So if this was a perfect world, if resources was not an issue, if money was not an issue, if time was not an issue, what would your MSA or your Muslim community on campus look like? So think about the different events that you all would have, right? Think about the programs, right? The quality of that. So just take a couple of seconds to dream about what your ideal MSA would look like. Okay. Um, I'm sure, mashallah, you all have a lot of dreams about what that looks like, but for the sake of time, we're going to go ahead and continue. And now that you have an idea of what your dream MSA looks like, I want you to step back a little bit and come back to reality and think about what your MSA currently looks like, right? So the good stuff about your MSA, the maybe not so strong stuff about your MSA, just look at what your MSA for what it is, right? Think about how big or small your MSA is. Think about the quality of relationships that the MSA members have with each other, right? Do we only talk to each other when we have MSA meetings, or do we actually hang out and talk to each other outside of the MSA? You can think about the different events and programs that you all have, right? Does your MSA have halal food on campus? Does your MSA pray at least one time a day on campus? So just think about the reality of what your MSA looks like right now. So I'll give you guys about like 10, 15, 30 seconds to kind of think about that. Okay. Um, and the next question, and this is something I want you guys to think about as we kind of move into our activity, is we're going to think about how do we make your dream MSA your actual reality, right? So how do we get your MSA to wherever it is right now, right? The good, the bad, the strong, the weak, whatever your MSA looks like. How do we get it from where it is to that ultimate goal of what you want your MSA to be? Okay, so we're gonna kind of work through that. Obviously, we're not gonna figure out every answer and every solution, but just like we've kind of been saying this entire weekend, we're gonna think about the steps to get there, how one thing will impact and influence another, and you guys will be able to set up your MSA for success. So that way, maybe if your MSA can't do everything this year, it's okay. Maybe the next year they'll be able to continue to build off of the work that you're doing. Alrighty. And so before we go ahead and break out into our activity, and we'll kind of walk through what that looks like as well. As you all are thinking about the different things that your MSA can do, whether it's the really big stuff or some of the smaller recurring things, I want you guys to think about the different ways your MSA can grow and contribute, or you can contribute to your MSA in a couple of different aspects. So I want you to think about the different spiritual or religious things that your MSA can do. So this could be maybe like, again, having prayer on campus, right? Maybe if your MSA doesn't have that at all, this could be, and this should be like a really good starting place. You can think about ways that your MSA or your the members in your on your MSA can grow educationally, right? Do you guys have any sort of halakas on campus? Are you all doing any collaborations with other, Muslim organizations or maybe your local masjid, right? If you don't have access to a scholar like on campus, which is completely fine, how often are you all doing something with your local masjid or any, imams nearby? Think about ways that your MSA can grow socially, right? So nothing like big or crazy like that, but everything that we're doing is for the sake of community, right? So again, think back to how often do your MSA members or the people, the Muslims in your school, how often do you all hang out or talk to each other outside of the MSA? Do you all have brotherhood events? Do you have sisters only events? Right? Are you all hanging out and talking to each other and like genuinely getting to know each other as brothers and sisters um, outside of MSA meetings? Okay. I included politically, but I want to emphasize that that doesn't necessarily mean, one party or another or anything like that. But think about ways your MSA can be involved with any advocacy work, right? A lot of schools in the spring semester in particular, they went through a lot of you know, uh, they went through a lot of things regarding their support for Palestine, right? So some MSAs maybe raised funds for different relief organizations. Some MSAs put out different statements. So think about maybe some ways that your MSA can do or contribute in that way. So that way the Muslims on your community feel as if they are part of a bigger mission and vision. And lastly, think about ways that your MSA can grow in the form of dawah, right? Something that I think all of us mentioned, or a topic that was brought up yesterday during one of our community of practices was how as Muslims in the US and Canada, we are pretty much a minority on our campuses, right? Regardless of like which state or province or city or whatever you're at. There may be a lot of Muslims, but it's still nowhere near the majority, right? So regardless of whether or not we want to be ambassador of Islam, we are always looked as Muslims, we're always looked at as being ambassadors of Islam. So what are some ways that your MSA can grow its dawah, its outreach to other non-Muslims? Um, and yeah, so we're going to go ahead and jump into our activity. So I went and I had dropped the link earlier in our chat. You can also scan this QR code so it'll take you to the document that we're going to be working through. But if you guys can take a couple of seconds and again, pull up that document, I'm going to close off this presentation and then we will go ahead and jump into our uh, the document, inshallah. Um, Brother MD, I see your question here. Do you have any advice as to how we can make our MSA grow spiritually or religiously? I have noticed in the past from our MSA events that we have more attendance during the social events, such as the Eid banquet, and less attendance for religious and educational events, such as Halakha. And that is a great question. I have some advice to give you, but I would love to hear from anyone else if you all want to share some advice for Brother MD. He's saying again that their MSA members tend to come out for really cool social events like Eid banquets and really don't show up for things like educational and religious events like halakas. So if you all have any advice for him, if you guys want to come off of mute and share some advice, or if you want to respond in the chat, I think that'd be really great to hear.
One thing that helps us a lot is having food at the halaqas. People always show up for food. You can just have like pizza or something. It makes it easy and simple, and people show up. Another way is to combine religious events with social events. So like what we sometimes will do is like during our like monthly uh we call them monthlies, they're just like general body meetings. We'll have like activities and whatnot. But we can also have like a halakha right before like a 10-15 minute halakha. Just short and sweet. You don't want to like bore people, but you also want to make sure they have that like spiritual boost as well.
Yeah, that was a great example. Yeah, kind of like doing a two-in-one, right? You don't necessarily have to create a separate event, but kind of just meet people where they're at and capture their attention, right? So that was a great example. Thank you so much, Brother Tahir. Dia said, make the cool events religious events at first, right? So pretty similar to what we shared before. You can kind of do a two-in-one, right? You don't necessarily have to separate them. And again, every MSA looks different, so you can kind of modify and play it by ear, right? But those are, I think, really great tips and tricks to get people invited. What I wanted to share aside from that as well is don't be afraid to like just try it out and see what works, right? It's okay if you plan something and maybe it doesn't go out really well the first time. Just modify, make some changes, and then do it again, right? A big theme that I think we talked about throughout this weekend is this idea of just doing things recurringly, repeatedly, right? Every single time you do it, you get 1% better, and then another percent better, and then another percent better, right? So your first time doing something may not be a great success, but that's okay, right? Maybe the second time around, you'll get 3 more people to come. And the third time around, you'll get 5 more people to come, right? So don't give up on an idea or an event or a program that you're doing just because it falls a little bit short of attendance or doesn't necessarily meet your expectations, right? Because maybe sometimes also people were a little bit too shy to come the first time, but if you do it again, they'll maybe feel a little bit more inviting, right? Or more invited and encouraged to come. Um, okay, so I will go ahead and share my screen again, just so that way we can kind of go through this theory of change process or document. Um, if you all are able to pull it up like on your own screens, that would be great. If not, you can also just look at my screen right now. But I'm going to walk you through this for the first time, and then we can kind of take some time for all of us to go through this, for your own MSA or for yourself as well. Okay. So the way that this works is you basically work from left to right. Okay, so you go through this, and each one of these rows is for each event or program that you want your MSA to do. It can be as big as you want it to be, as small as you want it to be, right? You can take time to create a plan for a fastathon or a really big Eid banquet that you guys want to do. Or if you want to create something like a Jummah on campus, again, you can use this as a way to get there, right? These are just ways, and this is not the only way, but this is a really good way to kind of develop that idea and plan. And again, you can be as detailed or as short, bullet pointed as you want it to be. So we'll go through an example that is shared here. Hopefully you guys can see that a little bit more. But on the document, I already gave you guys an example here in orange, just a way to kind of like go through and talk through these things, right? So let's say, for example, in my MSA, there are 15 MSA members. But, aside from our general board meetings, so our monthly meetings that we have, and maybe a halakha here and there, we really don't do a whole lot of anything. But we've noticed that there are a lot of Muslims on campus on Friday, but we don't have a place to pray for Jummah, or at least no one has made something, right? So a lot of times when it's Jummah time, people will just go to the masjid because it's 10 minutes away, and that works out better. But you notice that, hey, there are a lot of people on campus or like a lot of other Muslim students who maybe don't have a car or can get a ride to the masjid, right? So our goal maybe for this year is we want to make sure that we have Jummah on campus every single Friday. So whether that's 2 people, 5 people, whether it's, 5 MSA students and 10 professors who happen to be Muslims, we want to make sure that we are praying on campus, and we are going to prioritize that. So a way to work through that goal is to first off, just name what it is that you want to do. So in this situation, we are creating a program or an event called Team Jummah, right? Just a fun little name for it. And the category for it is religious, right? Yes, inshallah, people will like be social and talk to each other afterwards, but our primary purpose, our primary reason for doing this is that we want to grow spiritually and religiously. So that's going to be our category. And there are a couple of different categories. It's listed on the bottom of the document. There's the spiritual and religious category, social or community building category. There's the educational category, and then there's just a personal one, which we'll go through later on, right? So the target audience for Jummah or Team Jummah is that students on campus that are there on Friday, or of course, like around Jummah time, right? The reason you want to specify your target audience is because you want to make sure that, again, whatever it is that you're developing is tailoring to that community's needs, right? So again, there are students on campus who don't have a car, right? Who can't go to the local masjid. So we got to figure out something that is actually accessible to them on campus. Question 0, which is the next part here, is basically creating an if-then statement. And so for those of y'all who may not be familiar, an if-then statement looks pretty similar to this. And it basically means that in a perfect world, if you do X, Y, Z thing, it'll lead to A, B, C, right? It's basically saying, if I do this, this will be the outcome. If I put this in, this will be the output. So the question 0 here is, if we provide Jummah prayers on campus, then we will grow our relationship with Allah and our members, right? So this part right here, our relationship with Allah, that ties into the religious part of it, okay? The members part is, people come together. So of course, some social community building will happen, but our primary thing is that we want to grow our relationship with Allah. So it's a religious thing, okay? Our goal is that we want to host Jummah once a month on campus, right? And your goal can always change a little bit. You can modify it here and there, but this is just where we want to start off with, right? The reason we're putting Jummah once a month on campus is because we don't know if any of our MSA officers can commit to being there every single Jummah, right? Maybe we don't have a Jummah coordinator on our MSA team, so we're just going to have to rotate it. So maybe one month the president can lead the Jummah, maybe the next month the vice president can be in charge of making sure it happens, so on and so forth. The next column here is the metrics of success, right? So we talked about a little bit earlier how, yeah, you can make a bunch of events and programs, but you really want to make things that are impactful, And how do we measure impact or what is successful? We're measuring it by before the event or the program happens, we try and list out things that we think we can accomplish, right? So the way that we are going to define what ends up, having Juma on campus as a success is the number of attendees, the number of Juma held, and the overall satisfaction of the participants or the attendees. So for example, the number of attendees, I didn't specify here, but you can put something like the number of attendees grows from 5 to 10 people by the end of the year, right? That's a really good metric of success. You can say the number of Jummas held, you want to hold 5 Jummas in the fall semester, right? These are just goals that you're setting up for yourself. There is no right or wrong answer, right? But it's just thinking and taking into consideration, what do you think is realistic, right? If you want, you can set the bar really, really high. I know our goal here was to host a Jumma once a month, but if you want to set the bar of success super high, you can say we're going to host 20 Jummas in the fall semester. And you can, right? That's not a problem. But, just be aware that you may not always reach your goal and it's okay. But let's say, for our metric of success, we're going to say that 5 Jummas held on campus in the fall semester is what we consider success. And then the overall satisfaction of the participants, it doesn't have to be anything super complicated, right? You don't necessarily have to create a feedback form or, make people fill out a survey right after they leave Jumma or anything. You can just talk to maybe the 5 people who show up for Jumma and be like, hey, is this a good place? Like, we're praying at the library during Jumma. Is this a good place for you? Or do you think we should maybe move it to the student center, right? Just asking the attendees, a couple of questions here and there. Again, this is specific for the event that we are hosting, which is the Juma on campuses. For some events that are a little bit more complicated or maybe like extravagant, right? Let's say, for example, you're hosting an Eid banquet or a fastathon, you will want to make some of your metrics of success a little bit more specific, right? So let's say, for example, we're doing a fastathon. One of our metrics of success might be to have 200 people, 200 people attend, right? Another metric of success would be that, I don't know, $1,000 are raised. Oops. Sorry, guys, I can't spell, right? So those metrics of success are basically your goals, right? Like the specific goals that you want to have. And last, moving on is the budget. How much do you anticipate spending for whatever event or program that you're doing? This does not necessarily mean you've created a full budget sheet and have outlined every single detail and expense that you're going to have for this event, but just generally speaking, right? For Jama on campus, we want to say that our budget is $0 because we decided we're not going to provide any food, we're not going to provide any drinks. It's just, 20 minutes for Jama, 10 minutes for the khutbah, 5 minutes for prayers, and then 5 minutes for people to talk and socialize. In our campus, maybe room bookings are free for our MSA and we don't have to pay any additional money. So we decided that we're going to have this program, but we're not going to spend any money, right? For some of the bigger events, again, things like Fastathon and Eid Banquet, you will have to sit down and maybe come up with a couple of numbers. What will be helpful is if you take time to talk to the treasurer or the finance director on your MSA team to see, hey, do we have enough money for this event? Or maybe if we don't have enough money right now, what are some ways that we can get additional funding, right? So just set up a budget so that way you can plan whatever it is that happens for that event around that budget, right? You're not going to book a speaker that costs like $20,000 if your budget is like $100, right? You have to be realistic about that. And then last but not least is the time or the semester. So basically putting on the calendar where or when you want to have this event. So for Jummah is every Friday, right? So we want to begin in August when the school starts, and we want to end it in May when the semester or the school, the 2025 year ends, right? For Fastathon, maybe, because our budget is $5,000, we don't have all of that money yet. So we're going to wait until maybe March of 2025. So that way we can have enough time to plan all the things we want to for this event. But like I mentioned, this is basically the way that the theory of change process works. You're basically walking through the different ways and the steps to get there. So that way, again, you're developing programs and having events and plans that are impactful, that are actually helpful for your MSA, right? Some ideas may sound really, really cool in our head, but when we think about how it relates to MSA, maybe it's not super relevant, right? Or maybe it's not necessarily a need for our MSA, right? So it allows you to build things that are impactful and are very intentional to help out your MSA and your community. And it also helps you, be a good leader and come up with a plan and a way to get there, right? So that way you can provide direction for the other members on your team to figure out, hey, we need to find a budget for this, or we need to figure out how to raise funds for this event, right? We all decided we want to have Fastathon and everyone's really excited about it, but maybe we don't have the budget or the funding for it. So let's make sure that we're taking some time to fundraise for this event, or maybe we're taking some time to ask the student government to give us, $100 or $1,000 for our event, right? So this is basically the theory of change. You can use this for your organization, for your MSA. You can use this for different community programs or things that you're a part of, but you could also use this as like a personal development tool. And what I mean by that is, as you're going through these different categories, you're basically setting up a plan for yourself as well. So yesterday, we talked about a little bit about like personality and character development. And so this is one of the ways that can also help you develop a plan for you to grow to become a better Muslim leader. So let's say, for example, our masjid offers, youth halakas on Fridays. I want to grow and become a better Muslim spiritually, right? Maybe I'm not at the best place that I want to be. So I want to commit to going to the youth halakas every Fridays. And this is going to be on my time. This is not for the MSA or anything like that. And I want to grow spiritually. My question 0 is that if I go to Friday uh, halakas, I will learn more about Islam, right? Our goal is to attend every halakah. And then, maybe if you want, you can put some things here, or you can just leave it blank. And you want to commit to doing this every Friday this semester, right? So now you have a plan for yourself. And so the next thing you would do is just, go to your calendar on your phone, or if you have a planner, whatever that looks like, and make sure you're scheduling out time. So that way you're actually going to the youth halakas, right? If maybe you live on campus and you don't have a card to get to the youth halakas, maybe you can ask, something that you can do as part of your plan is to ask one of your friends to drop you off at the masjid, right? Or maybe figure out if you can bike to the masjid or walk to the masjid, whatever that looks like. So again, this is just an example that the theory of change, this plan can be used to develop something personally, like for yourself as well. Obviously, you don't have to fill out every single, box, and that's completely fine. But it can also, and it should be used for your MSA to develop things from start to finish, right? To create a plan. What would be really helpful, and what we're gonna do and take some time right now, is for you all to, go through and try and come up with at least like 2 or 3 different programs or events. And try and think of things that, again, fall into the different categories, right? Spiritual, social, education, dawah, personal. Well, mostly these, right? And maybe, this year for your MSA, maybe you guys don't want to do anything more than what you're already doing, right? Maybe your MSA is already like doing really, really well. You guys have a bunch of great programs. So what you can do instead is, instead of creating a new program, how about you take this time to evaluate or reflect on your current program, right? If you guys already have Jummas on campus, what can you do to take it to the next level, right? If you already have 50 people who come every single month or every single Jummah, what can you do to make it a better experience for them, right? Maybe you can provide sandwiches on the first Jummah of each month, right? As a way to give back to your community, right? So now you can develop a plan about, okay, how are we going to raise enough money, or where are we going to get the funds from, so that way we can provide that food for students who come for Jummah, right? So this document doesn't necessarily have to be used to create brand new things. It can also be used to just modify and elevate what you're currently doing right now, so that way you can improve for the future. And ideally, you'll create stuff like this, and ideally you would go through it with your entire MSA board. So that way you all are working towards this goal together. So I know for a couple of folks here, they're their whole board isn't on this call right now, and that's completely fine. But this is a good time for you as an MSA officer to kind of create some foundation and steps here. So that way, when you go meet with your MSA board, you can share it with them and be like, hey, guys, I came up with some ideas for things that, I think would be really cool for us to do this year. When is a good time for us to kind of talk through this? And just like how I spent a couple of minutes kind of going through this with you guys, you all can do that same thing with your team as well. You guys can do your own version of it. You can modify it. You can add extra rows. You can take out things. You can make it as detailed as you'd like. But so that way you're starting off the year with a plan. And the reason we really want to emphasize that is because for your MSA members, they are only going to be as interested and excited about the MSA as you all as MSA officers are. So if you are an MSA officer and you are not excited about the work that you're doing for your MSA, how can you expect the rest of your MSA members or, all of the other Muslims on campus to want to come out to your events? If you guys aren't excited about having Jama on campus, if you're not excited about creating a fastathon, then how are you going to get people to come out and be excited about that, right? So this is a way to kind of plan out the steps so that way you're able to reach your goals and have success. And that way you guys don't have to spend too much time when the semester starts coming up with a plan, right? You already come into the semester saying, hey, we're going to do these 5 events. Let's make sure we're working towards building that. Do you all have any questions, comments, or concerns about this theory of change document? Feel free to like unmute yourself, or if you guys want to put anything in the group, in the chat as well. Okay, it doesn't look like anyone has any questions. So I guess what we'll do right now is I dropped the link, I'll drop it again. So if you guys can take a couple of minutes, maybe we'll do I don't know, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, for you all to plan out 2 different events, right? Again, this can be brand new events, or this can be you taking time to think about how you can improve an event or a program that your MSA already has, okay? So if you guys can, again, this is the link for it. And just take a couple of minutes to kind of go through that. And then after about 10 minutes, we will, share some of the things that we want to do. Um, Uh, Brother Tahir, thank you so much for your kind words. I see that you mentioned that you have to go ahead and step out now. Yes, inshallah, I think this session is currently being recorded. So I think as Brother Ahmed mentioned before, after our day is complete or this intensive is complete, we'll go ahead and send out an email to you all with the recording links, as well as the presentations from all of our sessions that we have done so far, as well as this document, so that way you guys can use it with your MSA as well. But Jazakallah khair, thank you, Tahir, for asking that question. But for everyone else, if you want to take a couple of minutes to go ahead and work through this document. So right now it's 11:23. So if we want to take until maybe 11:35, so 12 minutes to kind of work through this document. Again, you don't have to complete this whole thing right now. If you want to, that's super cool. But if you want to do and come up with at least 2 programs or events that you would like to see within your MSA. So inshallah, we will take some time right now for everyone to kind of go through that. If you're on a computer or a desktop, if you want to just download the document and do it directly there, or if you're not able to do that, you're welcome to use like a piece of paper or your phone and kind of go through there. So that way when we regroup, we'll just go around, and if you guys can kind of walk us through like an event that you want to do. So nothing too crazy, inshallah. But I will go ahead and put up a slide so that way we will regroup in about 11 minutes, inshallah. Okay, assalamu alaikum everyone. Alrighty, so we'll go ahead and get back to the theory of change. So you all had about 10, 12-ish minutes to go ahead and create, one or two different programs or events that you want to have for your MSA. I would love to hear from you all, what you guys were able to develop. Again, this is a completely safe space, so don't feel like you need to have every single thing, written or worked out or anything like that. But if anyone wants to volunteer to share something that they came up with, if you want to share your screen, you're more than welcome to do that. Or if you want to just come off of mute and you can just talk us through maybe something that you have planned out, inshallah. So if someone wants to volunteer,
Yeah, I could volunteer. Can you guys hear me?
yes, you're good.
Okay. So I know that at the local masjid that we have, usually they offer Saturday halakas. So what we do is we as youth, we go to the masjid um and we do like the sheikh would provide a small lecture, and then afterwards if we have any questions, and then usually we would eat like uh, lunch or whatever at the time it would be. Usually it's after asr, so I guess it would be more of a dinner slash lunch. And then we would and then after that we would play soccer or whatever in the back of the masjid. um, so I was thinking about doing something where we interpret bringing the most of the Muslim students, making it into like an MSA event, where I can make an announcement where like it's not just young guys. We could also do like adults that could also attend these, and then afterwards we can have like the chef give a small lecture, and then we could do like a discussion, and after that we can have pizza or something. Um, so what I wrote was I wrote that it's a Saturday halaqah at the masjid for youth and adults, um, and the goal is to unite all Muslims around the city, especially the students on campus, about anything we have on our mind. And Sheikh would give 30-minute long lecture, or maybe if he wants to go longer, it depends on what um, everyone feels comfortable with. Um, and the goal is to basically just unite all Muslims and to kind of what's it called? Because usually when we do those events, we usually only do like guys and then the girls on another day. But I'm thinking about doing where if we bring everyone, like because we also have a women's section in the back, so it would be also like perfect for the women to be able to come. And then what was it called? And for also obviously to do the sports tournaments. If let's say one Saturday we can make teams like the first Saturday, and then the next Saturday we could do like whoever won plays next against each other, do something exciting where it keeps them engaged and want to do more of it. And then the goal is to do it at least once a week. But if usually it gets really hard because there's exams, so we could do it like twice a month, or at least like my goal is to do it once a week because it already happens every week, so might as well just do it. But if it gets like too much for most of the students, they can't attend, and I see that there's only a few students coming, then we could do it like twice a month or something. Depends on what availability. And then also we'll take note of how many people joined, and also how many people were enjoying and actually coming and attending the event frequently. And our budget would be just for the food. So I would assume probably around $30. Get like a few like pizzas or something. Usually the cheapest one is pizza. Um, and then and then usually our goal is to start from the beginning of the semester. When it starts, I'm thinking also starting early as well, like maybe after I do my first meeting with the officers about everything that we've talked about here. Maybe we could come up with something like, well, let's start doing already like events. And then another event, obviously, I want to do on campus is Juma prayer, but we have already you've already kind of given us the example, but just similar to what you said. But we already have someone who frequently comes and does like a khutbah. So for us, I'm not really too worried about finding someone. Um, so we can do this like every week. And usually during like depending on when students are available, we would pick a time between like after Dhuhr prayer. Usually when we used to do it, we used to do it like around 2. So I'm planning on keeping that like around 2 or 1:30 to 2 p.m. Just to kind of keep students engaged every week. And yeah, that's all I have right now. But I don't know if there's. I'm pretty sure I'll hear something from someone else, and I'll write it down.
Awesome. Jazakallah khairan. Thank you so much, Dia, for sharing that. Those are definitely amazing things to do, and a really, really great starting point for the MSA. Some things, and these are not answers or anything you need to have right now, but just some things to kind of keep in mind, as you guys progress with this event, and maybe things that you can modify or think about are maybe take into consideration students who are on campus and maybe need a ride to the masjid. Think about you mentioned it's usually the brothers who do it, but there's a sister side, of course, at the masjid. So maybe think about having a sister who's on the MSA board, dedicated to making sure that sisters also come through for the event as well. And it doesn't have to be a very heavy job to do, right? But just when it's on the Saturday or on Friday, so the day before you guys have this event, on the next day you can just talk with the sister and be like, hey, are we good? Like, do the sisters need anything? So on and so forth. But just some things to keep in mind, right? So that way you guys are improving as you progress. But Jazakallah khairan, those are great examples. I appreciate you sharing that. Sister Sana or Sister Manzura, if you guys if you feel comfortable sharing anything that you kind of developed through the theory of change.
It was really beneficial for me. Thank you for organizing such events. And even furthermore, if you share your knowledge and um, grow together to learn, we would really appreciate online events. So it's making us connected. Yeah, any skills like such kind of for professional personal growth skills like or others, we would join. I would join. Thank
For
you.
sure. No, Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much, Sister Manzura, for all of that. And I see Sister Sana, you put on the group chat, I'm not able to talk. No worries, inshallah. But yeah, no, so we went through a couple of different examples, right? And then we also talked about what it looks like if you do a really big event. Just like with everything else, especially with this plan, the theory of change document, it's like a living and breathing document, right? So you can always go back to it after maybe you have your first Jummah and it doesn't work out exactly the way that you planned it. You can go back to the document and see what are some ways that you can improve it, so that way the next time it'll be even bigger and better, right? So it's everything will get better over time, inshallah, but you always have to be willing to take feedback into consideration and figure out ways that you can improve it, right? And then ultimately tie all of that back to the work that you're doing, and tie it all back to your intention, your niyyah, about doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's the only one who can grant us all the success in this life. So even if we can plan, Allah is the best of planners and he can plan even better for us. So as you're developing your plans, make sure that you are constantly making dua and asking Allah to give you success and barakah in the work that you're doing, and to make sure that your intentions are truly for the sake of the community. But that was a theory of change. As I mentioned before, if you all have any suggestions or feedback, or if you want to kind of work through the different things that we talked about, on the msaNational team, we are more than happy to, hop on a call, a Zoom meeting, if you want to text us or whatever, just to, offer any insider feedback. Maybe with this tool that we talked about today, you want to go back to your MSA board and be like, hey guys, like I really want us to work through this document. After you work through that document, we're happy to like review it and provide some like advice for you all as well. If you want another pair of eyes to go through it, just to make sure it kind of makes sense and ask some questions. But again, on behalf of msaNational, thank you all so much for taking time out of your weekends to join us for this weekend intensive, this leadership intensive. We want to thank the folks at the Muslim American Society, at MAS, for their time, their efforts in creating and setting all of this up, and for really helping us support the work that you all are doing as student leaders and Muslims in your own, communities. And as always, please let us know if we can do anything to help and support you all. Inshallah, we will be sending over the different session recordings, the documents that we worked through, as well as any relevant contact information. And then if you have any questions at all, just feel free to let us know. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Brother Ahmed if there was anything else that he wanted to mention, and go ahead and close us off, inshallah.